All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our What's for Lunch program. We're super excited to have Christina and Victoria here with us. They're part of the Toastmasters group, and so I'm really excited to see the tips and tricks that they have for us today on public speaking and just speaking in general. I know that I struggle a lot in that area, so I'm super excited to learn a lot from them. So I'm gonna pass it on over to them. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and they'll have some interactive questions for us to do too. So feel free to have your camera on or off. It is a what's for lunch, so you can eat your lunch during this hour. And if you have any questions, just utilize the chat box.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're looking forward to spending this time with you. We're going to get right at it because an hour goes so very fast. Vicki, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina. Welcome, everyone. What I'd like you to do is put in the chat what you think public speaking is. Before we even start talking about it, just give us what your thoughts, when I say public speaking, what you think of when you hear that. And I'm just going to give you a moment to do that. Christina, would you like to read out some of the answers as they come in?
I will. Our first one in is speeches with an exclamation mark.
Yes.
Big crowds. Preparing remarks to give to a group. Speaking in front of people. Presentations. Communicating to large groups. Business meetings. Audience members. Any speaking to more than 2 people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your input. I too thought all of those things when I first heard about public speaking. And I'm just going to let you know a little bit about me. I grew up when my childhood performing on stages and doing plays and such. And so I was comfortable talking in front of people and using other people's words. But when it came down to giving my thoughts in front of people, that was one thing that really drew me to learn more about public speaking. So I'm going to now read a definition of what public speaking is, and we'll kind of see what they thought. So they say public speaking, also called oratory or oration, is giving speeches face-to-face to a live audience. However, due to the evolution, there we go, the evolution of public speaking, it is moderately viewed as any form of speaking, formally or informally, between an audience and the speaker. Traditionally, public speaking was considered to be the art of persuasion. That act can be accomplished by either performing to include to inform people, to persuade people, or to entertain people. And there are all sorts of different methods that we can use now for public speaking. And so today, now that you kind of have a context of what public speaking may be, we're going to dive deeper into that. And so Christina is really going to touch upon this next subject of fear. And Christina, can you tell us more about that?
As you may have read in the little blurb about what we were doing today, 73% of people have more fear of public speaking than death, which is crazy to think. But it's true. It actually has a name, and it's called glossophobia, fear of public speaking. What we'd like to have you post in the chat now is what makes you fearful when you think about public speaking. And we'll give you just a couple seconds to post some things. Vicki, if you want to read what
I
comes.
will. We have blanking out, embarrassing myself, being in the spotlight, saying the right or wrong words, not knowing what to say or how to answer the questions, not having the correct wording, judgment, saying the wrong thing, the organization of their thoughts, getting them in order. Those are just some of the few that have come in.
Great comments, and very, very true of most people. There's often a fear of being judged. And as we've heard, a fear of negative responses, the fear of going blank. Probably the biggest source of fear is that it's not something we do very often, public speaking. Being able to practice, being able to experience it on a more regular basis really does help negate the fear, helps us get more confident and more comfortable speaking to groups. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Vicki is going to tell us a little bit more about one form of public speaking, which is spontaneous conversations. Vicki?
Thank you so much. I know that when I was in situations and somebody would ask me a question, I would draw a blank. Sometimes I would be a deer in the headlights, or my speech was filled with ums and ahs, and my thoughts just weren't coming out clearly. And I realized that I needed to practice this. And when I heard about Toastmasters, I had thoughts of, can I really do this? Because I had heard stories about when you join a Toastmaster group, if you have ums and ahs, they would let you know. And one of the clubs that would let you know is they would throw a quarter in a tin bucket. So they would make this ping every time you said an ah and. And I knew from listening to myself that nobody would have been able to hear what I was saying, because it would have been filled with ping, 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 because I did have a lot of uhs and ums when I would have that conversation. Now think back, do you ever leave a conversation and half an hour later, everything comes to your mind of what you would have said or what you wanted to say, and you think to yourself, why can't I do that? It's just one of those skills that we have learned through Toastmasters to help us with that. And what we do is we call that impromptu speaking or spontaneous speaking. And what it does is it gives us practice as to how to answer questions. Somebody would ask me a question off the cuff about any subject, and then I would have to answer it. Now, when I first started Toastmasters, you can ask anybody in my original club that I answered the question in 30 seconds. And let me tell you, there's supposed to be a minute to 2 minutes. Well, mine was answered within 30 seconds, and I would have had probably 40 uhs and ums in there. And everyone's saying, oh, we wish we would have been able to record it so that you can see how much you've improved and learned. And I just had an I heard it. It's one of those curses. Once you join Toastmasters, you start hearing your uhs and ums, and then you also start hearing other people's ahs and ums. It's kind of a fun thing when you're sitting in a presentation and doing those tick marks, but it's something that we need to practice, because I feel so much more comfortable now when I go into a situation and I know that I'm going to have that conversation with somebody, and I know that I'm going to be prepared. Now think about it. Not only do we have those conversations at work where we're in a meeting, somebody asks you your opinion and you want that response to be great, but think about when we're at the chamber and we're mingling and we're doing back and forth and we're talking. We want to be able to have that conversation with somebody, and 30 minutes later, not think to ourselves, oh, man, I wish I had said that. It's just one of those things that we get to practice over and over again. And that's one reason why what Toastmasters has helped me with. And Christina, do we have any questions or anything in the chat yet?
I haven't seen any questions. Does anyone have any questions for Vicki about what she's been sharing?
If not, just chat them. You can put them in the chat box as you're thinking about them, and then we will get to them. But Christina, I would love for you to tell us more about prepared speeches.
All right, for this, I'm going to stand up because I need my hands in order to talk. Prepared speeches. Suppose your boss or someone at work comes to you and says, we'd like you to give a presentation on X, this subject. What's your first thought? Well, let's see, what day is it? Maybe I can call in sick. That's always a good one. Or isn't there somebody else who might be better at this than me? Well, let's talk about how to make you the best prepared you can be for that. I want to start by sharing what I call being a speech sleuth. I learned this the hard way. One of the first times I spoke publicly, I assumed I knew what I needed to know, and I created a speech. And then I found myself in an environment where some of the things I had in the speech weren't understood by the audience I was talking to. So what's a speech sleuth? There are 6 questions that I suggest you get the answers to before you even start constructing a speech. They are who, what, when, where, why, and how. So let's go through those one at a time. Who? Who is your audience? Is it people from work who understand the acronyms and the technical terms that you're going to be potentially sharing? Or is it a Rotary Club who has no understanding really at all of your work or your passion that you're going to be sharing about? Who's going to be there as your audience? The next one is what? Someone asked you to speak. What do they want you to accomplish through that? Have an interview with them. Do they want you to inform? Do they want you to educate? As Vicki said, do they want you to entertain? Do they want you to challenge your audience? What is their goal for your talk so that you can meet their expectations and the expectations of the audience that they're representing? Who, what, when? When is this going to happen? Not only the day, but the time of day is very important. If it's in the morning, most people are pretty sharp in the morning. Right after lunch, things get a little different. It takes a little more energy. You need to put a little more energy into that speech if it's after lunch. And what if it's evening at a conference or a dinner? People tend to be thinking about what's going on at home. They're, looking at watches. So keeping in mind what time of day you're going to be presenting is very important as you are constructing your speech. Who, what, when, where? Where is this going to be? Is it in an auditorium? Is it in a conference room? Is it on Zoom like this? I did a presentation for a group in Quincy a couple of years ago. I made the mistake of not going and actually physically looking at the venue at the time of day that I was going to be speaking. What happened when I got there was the sun was coming in the windows at such an angle that the PowerPoint I had prepared was practically invisible to the audience. So I was scrambling at the last minute. I really highly suggest if you can go to the venue, stand where you will be standing, if it's going to be on stage or not. Are you going to have a handheld mic or a lapel mic or no mic? Look at the venue. How will the chairs be arranged? Will it be tables or will it be auditorium style? That way, as you're preparing your speech and practicing your speech, you can visualize yourself in the space, and it makes it much more smooth and much less fearful when you get there. Who, what, when, where, why is this subject important? Why is it important to you? What is your passion with regard to this? What is your expertise? What is it you want to share? The why of the importance of this subject to your audience. So we have who, what, when, where, why, how. How are you going to be presenting? Will it be via live audience or Zoom? Vicki's going to talk a little bit more about those two things in the next segment. And who, what, when, where, why, and how. We've covered them all. When you are then fully informed on those topics, then you can begin writing a speech with your audience in mind, with the facility in mind, with the goals in mind. It makes it much easier for it to come together. You also will find out from the person who invited you, what's the length of time that's allocated to your talk. It's very important to stay within that time limit. More is not always good. That's another thing that we practice in Toastmasters, is speaking within a defined time frame. When you are then ready to compose your speech, it's much like a good story or a good book. There needs to be an introduction, then the body, and the conclusion. The introduction lets your audience know where you're taking them. What is this journey we're going on today? Perhaps you incorporate a short story into that introduction. What is the goal that you want them to take away from your talk? The body then expounds on that introduction. My recommendation is 3 main points. Most people can remember 3 main points. If we get more than that in a speech, it gets too much information, and it's difficult to cover more than 3 main points in a speech and cover them well. I'm also a member of a speakers bureau, and that was one of the main training elements of that was think in threes. Think in threes. There are several, get to the right page here, so I can tell you exactly who this information came from. According to the science of audience engagement, the average adult attention span is 5 minutes. 5 minutes, which means every 5 minutes, things need to change up so that your audience has something new to think about, something new to look at, something new to inspire them. How do you do that? How do you hold their attention? There are 3 recommendations. The first is stories. Stories stick. People remember stories. They may not remember your 3 points, but they will remember stories. The second is vocal variety. Incorporate pauses. Incorporate volume. You can even do different vocal intonations or sing if you want, but I'm not going to do either one because I'm not very good at either one. Third is visual aids. 3 days after attending an event, people retain 10%, only 10% of this oral presentation, 35% of a visual presentation, and 65% of a presentation that combines oral and video. or visual, sorry. One challenge with visuals, and speaking now of PowerPoint, is using them correctly. Because if you have something on the screen, people are looking at the screen and reading it. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. I went to a banquet one evening and the speaker, honestly, literally everything that he said was on a slide. So we basically could sit there and read ahead of his presentation because he was putting it all up on the PowerPoint. By contrast, if I were to be giving a speech about homelessness in the Wenatchee Valley, and I put up a picture of tent camps, and as I spoke about that, you could look at that picture. The visual, whether you hear my words or not, that visual is going to stick. Then if I talk about the increase in homelessness, and I put a chart up that shows the increase in the last 5 years, for instance, as I'm sharing that information and you're looking at it on the screen, my words and what's up there mesh together. You're going to get it from the combination. When I need you to pay attention to me, the PowerPoint goes off so that our eyes meet and I can share the other information I want to get across to you. The third is a conclusion. The conclusion is like putting a bow on this package. It's the wrap up. It's reiterating your introduction, restating your 3 main points, and then giving your audience what you want them to take away. Homelessness has become a crisis in our valley. Each of us can do something about it. Here are ways you can get involved, and I encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and get involved. Okay, right? That's an encouragement type conclusion. Any questions for anything that I've shared so far?
I am not seeing any questions yet.
Okay. One of the comments that came out in the fear was organizing my thoughts in order. Best way I know to do that is to create an outline. I create an outline and I let it simmer. I'll go back and look at it the next day. Maybe I'll let it simmer for 2 or 3 days. Then it all begins to come together a lot better in flow. The last thing I write when I'm preparing a speech is the introduction and the conclusion, because the body tends to change as I think about it and think about my audience and think about the location, think about the why of this speech. So the introduction and the conclusion are the last pieces that I write. Zoom is a great tool. Here's one of the best things I've found, best ways I've found to use it. I can do a Zoom meeting and not invite anybody. Just have me and practice a speech. It's a great technique. It's a great way for you to practice the flow of a speech. Does this story lead into this? How's the transition from one thought to another? It's different when you write it than it is when you speak it. So figuring out that transition, being able to practice that, Zoom has been a huge asset in that regard. You can be on there all by yourself all day and it doesn't cost you a dime. unless there are other questions, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Vicki, and she's going to talk about some differences between Zoom and live.
Thank you, Christina. That was wonderful. Yes. Having prepared speeches, a lot of work goes into it, but when you finish, it feels very rewarding because you've gotten your message out there. I believe that everyone has a message within them that they are to share, and just finding out the correct vehicle to do so does that. Right now, I'm going to talk about the difference between in-person and Zoom. Our lives have been taken over by Zoom this past year. Just in the chat, type a number 1 if you were using Zoom prior to the pandemic starting in March of 2019. Just type a number 1 in the chat if you were using Zoom on a regular basis before, and I'll do that also. And Christina, just count the number of ones and we'll see kind of percentage wise of who was using it prior to March 2019. And oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I am. So far, we have 5, including you.
Okay. So about 1/4 of us, maybe a little less than 1/4 of us were using Zoom prior to. It has changed our lives. I remember when I started trainings and going in live audiences, the training room, just as Christina said, you had to show up early in order to learn what the space was all about, so that if you were going to give your speech, you would be able to do that. Well, with Zoom, now all we have to do is click a button, hope that our computer hasn't decided that it needs to update right then, and we can get on the meeting right away. There's no travel. It's just a world of difference. But some of the difference happens also of how we are on Zoom. Now, to make eye contact, our tendency is to look at everybody on the screen. So I'm looking at Rosa, and then I'm looking at Christina, and then I'm looking at Ruben, and I'm looking at Sandra, and my eyes kind of move back and forth to those little squares. But if we're truly making eye contact, I would look right into the camera and talk to you. But to me, that just doesn't feel comforting, and that we're having that conversation. It feels like sterile because you realize that I'm looking into the camera. And we've had this discussion with friends of mine about which is the better way, because in our industry, we want to connect with people and we want to make them feel like they're still being heard, even though we are on a computer screen. And how are we going to be able to do that? So I think whatever comes from your personality, if you're one that likes to look in the camera and you feel like you're connecting, your audience will feel like you're connecting with them as well. I tend to want to look at the little grid and see everybody in the gallery view and make connection that way. Then stage. Christina did a wonderful job of standing up so that she could have all of her arm movements, that we could see her energy level is higher, because if we stand up, it's just natural that our adrenaline just wants to kick in and give it, more of an oomph to our speech. Whereas when we're sitting down, perhaps not as much. Now, I chose to sit down today because, one, I knew that Christina would be standing for hers. And also because I feel that when I'm sitting down, it's more of a conversation. We're just sitting down, having lunch together and talking about public speaking. But one of the downfalls of that is I like to talk with my hands too. So I need to know where my camera is. And I try not to have this thing come up when I talk with my hands, so where you just see the fingertips, because that is distracting. So I've moved my camera up to where it just frames my face and my neck about here. So I can still move my arms. You can tell that I'm moving them, but you don't get this little distracting pop, 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 pop. And do what Christina did. If you're going to be speaking on Zoom, practice. Open a Zoom meeting room with just yourself, set it up so that you know what it's going to look like. Don't be surprised. You don't have to be surprised on Zoom. Another thing, lighting. This is just so much fun. So right now I have natural light coming in. You can see it through the window. And I love natural light, but the way my room is set up now, it doesn't work. So I have another light coming in on me. And if I were to turn it off, you would see how dark it gets. And so therefore, check that out too when you're on Zoom. We've had trainings where the person is completely in the dark and we want to see your face. So please, if you're going to be on Zoom and you're presenting or talking, figure out what it's going to look like because we do want to see you. Let's see what else. Oh, minimize distractions. Okay, this is a fun one because back before March of 2019, when people would present on Zoom, because it was a platform that more and more people were using because we wanted an international audience, and that's one way to do it is on Zoom. But we had to keep it as professional as we could. We wanted to make sure that the background looked good and it was quiet and what have you. Now, jump forward to April 2020, when everybody was all of a sudden working from home. Our families were around us, our dogs were around us. We could not minimize those distractions at all. And so our society has become more accepting of those, but we also need to be cognizant of them. If you're going to be doing a presentation, you might want to make sure that the dog is taken care of. Now, you heard my dogs back in the background when we first started, and I have my family members who are in the house also that know that if they can tell that I'm on a presentation and the dogs start barking, they're going to help and get the dogs entertained or help with the dogs, because it's just one of those things. So have backup plans for those distractions because we can't get rid of them, but depending on the circumstances of your Zoom, do that. Now, I know that we will be getting back to public speaking or interacting in person in large groups. So how can you connect with people when you want it to feel intimate, but you're in a group of 500? And I've had to learn this technique because when you go, one of the persons that I have read a lot of and seen a lot of documentaries on is Tony Robbins, because he is a motivational speaker. I wanted to learn how to be a motivational speaker. And he's very big and just out there. And I remember seeing his big white toothy grin, and he was bigger than life. And I realized that I could not present that way. I needed to be able to present where I was connecting with the audience and felt like I was connecting with the audience. And then I met my mentor, Jack Canfield, who is the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. And when I went to go see him live, there were over 500 people in the audience, but I felt like he was talking directly to me. And I was trying to figure out what was it that it was. And it was his language techniques where he would directly ask a question to me. Have you ever traveled to Europe? Have you ever done this? And then I heard a presentation just this past Friday from a world champion speaker. And he was talking about the same thing, is that you want to make that connection, even if your audience is large. So on Zoom, we can do that by calling out people's names. When I was talking about making eye contact, I spoke to Rosa and I spoke to Ruben, I spoke to Sandra. We made connection. And when you're in a large room, you can do that also. So the difference between Zoom and in person is vast, but also small at the same time. And so that is what I have to say about Zoom versus live. Christina, you're up.
I have just a few more thoughts on that as well. I'm a life coach, and I have been doing some online trainings via Zoom. one of the presenters on one of the trainings had the background, the fake, what is, I don't know what you call that. It's like background Ruben has is a canned background, for lack of a better term.
They call it a virtual background.
Virtual, thank you. I don't use them because I don't even know how to do that on Zoom, something I need to learn. This particular speaker decided it would be great if he looked like the Wizard of Oz. He did, everything was virtual background except his face. It was so distracting. I wanted to, in fact, I did put in the chat box several times, can we please at least see his shoulders? This is, I don't honestly remember a thing he said because it was so distracting. I don't know why he thought that was cute or funny or whatever, but be careful about things like that. And also when you set up, like Vicki said, test the lighting. Check the lighting in the room. Check the elevation of your computer against where you're going to be sitting so that it's not looking up your nose or down on the top of your head. Not that you could get a computer up that high, but the thing I've mostly seen is it's low and people are looking down into the screen and it's kind of distracting. So do play around with that option to bring up Zoom and get your surroundings situated before you start in. Any questions so far? Or input or thoughts? Any of your own experiences that you'd like to share? You can just drop them in the chat box or give us a thumbs up. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about how to develop polished public speaking skills. One of the experiences that I have had on numerous occasions is attending a business after hours, the chamber business after hours. Granted, those haven't been held on site for a while, but we're getting closer. Those situations are public speaking situations where you're networking, you're meeting people, you're chatting one-on-one. All of the organizational skills of creating a prepared speech go into those short conversations. There's an introduction, there's a body, and there's a conclusion, even if you're only chatting with someone for a minute or two. What's going on with you at work? Lately, we've been exploring some opportunities to grow the business. Oh, really? Tell me more about that. So you've given the introduction, you've drawn the person in, and then, well, we're looking at some property in East Wenatchee, and there's another parcel maybe in Wenatchee that's going to come available. It's very exciting. And we're thinking sometime within the next year, we may break ground. There's been this conversation that had a great introduction. You told them a little bit about it. And then the conclusion could just be, hey, I'll keep you posted. Even short little conversations like that, that is public speaking. Every time you have a one-on-one conversation with someone, you're speaking publicly. When you're on the phone, you're speaking publicly. So expand that thought of public speaking being just to a large group, because we experience it, we practice it on a daily basis. And being aware of that is a great way to hone your own skills. Just practice that intro body conclusion thought in conversation. Then when you are in a situation where you're doing a longer speech, it is a more natural sequence for you. It just seems to flow better that way. Vicki and I want to spend some time too talking about Toastmasters. I got into Toastmasters. My husband had been in for a little while and encouraged me to go to a meeting with him. At that point, I had been doing quite a bit of public speaking already. I'd spoken at a number of women's retreats. I had done some speaking on the speakers circuit that I was a part of. What surprised me was how much I learned and have learned and still am learning through Toastmasters. As Vicki said, it gives us the opportunity to practice public speaking in a safe environment. Maybe there are 15 or 20 people in the room, not 500, but learning to make eye contact, learning to use the stage. One of the interesting things about using a stage is if you've ever been to a aerobics class or a class like that, you'll notice that the instructor does things with the opposite foot as you're following. They'll say, go to your left, and they're actually going to their right because you're mirroring what they're doing. The same is true with speaking. If I'm talking about a timeline, I need to, because in our country, we read from left to right, which I don't know if that's working right for you. I would need to start on the right side of the stage, so it's your left, and talk about the timeline and take steps toward my left, so that you're following not only my movement, but the chronological order of my thoughts. That's just one little tiny tip that I have been able to learn and practice and perfect as a result of being part of the Toastmasters group here in Wenatchee. We have 2 clubs. One meets on Monday evenings from 5:30 to 6:30. One meets on, is it Wednesday mornings, Vicki? From 7 to 8? Yes. Needless to say, I'm in the 5:30 to 6:30 one. I was in the morning one for a while. I don't do so well public speaking at 7 o'clock in the morning. You are more than welcome to visit anytime. We'll put the contact information. Vicki, I guess your contact information would be best, and then you could send them a Zoom link, anyone who's interested.
Yes, I'll just put my email that they can email me that they'd like the link.
And anyone who then watches the video of this, Rosa, could you let him have Vicki coordinates our Zoom meetings for us every week. So she's our go-to gal.
Yeah.
Toastmasters has been great. And I can't say enough good things about it. Vicki, I would love for you to share a little bit about Pathways.
Yes, I would love to tell you about Pathways. What that is we call our educational program. And what that entails is that you have a path, and there's 11 different to choose from. It can go from leadership to speaking, because believe it or not, Toastmasters tagline is not where speakers are made. Toastmasters tagline is where leaders are made. They have a whole group of different exercises and opportunities to learn how to grow, not only with public speaking, but with leadership. And with those paths, it allows you to practice your speaking. It starts out with where you do an icebreaker speech. It's a 4 to 6 minute speech. It's called the icebreaker because you're just telling your group, the Toastmaster Club about yourself. And it's pretty easy speech because who knows you better than yourself? And it's 4 to 6 minutes. I know you're thinking 4 to 6 minutes, that's a long time. However, once you get there, you realize that it's not. So we have that type of speech. We also get evaluations. We didn't even touch upon this, Christina, where we get feedback. And I used to always be scared of feedback because I didn't want to have negativity and everything pointed out that I did wrong. But what it is that it is what worked well, keep doing it because that really hit it home. Or try this. It didn't quite mesh this time, so try this. And we're always very supportive. And like Christina said, it is a great place to practice. If you have a speech that you need to be giving or a presentation, part of Pathways is that is something that you practice and get credit for their being a Toastmaster and in our program, but then it also involves your work. They've really tried to incorporate people's work into how they can grow within Toastmasters and personally and how to develop. It's just a great program. If you have any questions, more details about how the program works, I would be happy to go over it. I have been a proponent since it was announced that we were going to have this platform, and I went around the district and talked about it and got everybody on board. So it's just great. Christina.
One of the things I'd like to share with you is how I use Toastmasters skills now, how I use public speaking now in my everyday life. I am the board chair of Columbia Valley Community Health. And in that position, I lead meetings on nearly a weekly basis. I interact with the CEO, with the leadership team at CVCH. I get to go to Olympia and represent on lobby days in January. We take a few board members every year to Washington, D.C. for the policy and initiative days in Washington, D.C. Feeling comfortable speaking to state representatives and legislators and our national level Congress people, being comfortable at business meetings, being comfortable leading a board meeting. Those are all public speaking opportunities that I have on a regular basis. And I think if each of you think about your own life experiences, the clubs that you're a member of, the even if it's your kids' sports teams, there are opportunities to be leading those causes. One of the things that holds people back from taking leadership roles is a fear of public speaking. I might have to talk in front of all these people. I can't do that. So I just won't volunteer. That makes me very sad because everyone can learn these skills and can get comfortable with them. Everyone can. So I really encourage you to think back over things we've talked about today, preparing for speech. What are the who, what, when, where, why, and how? What are those aspects of the situations that you could potentially find yourself as a leader, as a speaker, as an influencer? Take advantage of opportunities to polish skills in a safe environment like Toastmasters. It's for the cost, it's the most effective training and inexpensive training tool I'm aware of. Right now we are meeting via Zoom, but in June, I believe it's June 21st, we will be back to some in person. It'll be a hybrid program where you can log in and come via Zoom or in person, either way. So we're definitely looking forward to that.
And I have put the toastmasters.org link in the chat. You're welcome to look at that as well.
What questions or thoughts do you have? Have we covered everything for you? You can unmute yourselves and share. That'd be great. Everybody's so quiet.
Yeah, it's that lunch hour.
I just want to say thank you for presenting. I have heard about Toastmasters for a couple of years now and just have not made it or looked more into it past that. So thank you for presenting. I also want to just say a couple of the details that you said, Vicky, that were very important, in Zoom as we've been using it, looking at the camera, when you're talking. I think that's one that I think clicked a couple months ago to me, and I don't know why it took so long, but I think it's something that's really helped me in Zoom calls and talking to others. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And then Christina, you stood up during a presentation, which I thought was really good. And I'm hoping to be able to do that at some point on a Zoom call, because I think that, again, also shows some presence and just changes what I think we've all gotten used to over the last year and a half. So thank you.
Thanks, Ruben. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Be brave. Public speaking. Let's go.
Yeah, same. I mean, I'm new to my position here at Wenatchee Valley College, and so I'm the director of TRIO programs. And there are just, I feel like, a lot of little impromptu speeches or like interactions. And I do feel a little like unprepared sometimes, and I just get a little like blanked out. And so I am excited to kind of learn more about Toastmasters and probably get involved. I'm also new to Wenatchee in general, so I think this would be kind of a nice way to get to know other people in the area. But yeah, I was kind of surprised of like how many times you get called on meetings, or or to like to do an introduction or to tell people about your program, just casually. And I find myself like, and I think I've gotten it better now, but yeah, this would be a great way to kind of brush up on my skills and feel more comfortable with just expressing some of that information and relaying that. But thank you for today. The content was really, really great.
Thank you. One thing about Toastmasters too, I had the impression before I joined that it was people in business suits and kind of stuffy, and they knew what they were doing and they were going to be using great big words, and it was scary to me. That is not, at least not Wenatchee Toastmasters. It is a very comfortable group. People are encouraging and down to earth, very friendly. That's one point. Another point I want to make is that our meetings are 1 hour and that's it. It starts at 5:30 sharp. It ends at 6:30 sharp. There are various roles within the club that get filled each week. So there are opportunities for members to take on those roles. It is one of the Toastmasters' biggest deals to be respectful of people's time. So it is 5:30 to 6:30, just like this meeting today is 12 to 1, and we're out of here at 1 or a little sooner. But that's another thing I wanted to let you know. You don't have to be afraid that, gosh, I'm going to get there and then I'm going to be stuck there for hours in the evening. No, it's 1 hour in and out. That's it. Vicki, anything else?
I just want to thank everybody for showing up, and Ruben and Sandra for taking it out there and asking or talking a question or just sharing with us and everything. So I personally invite both of you to one of our Toastmaster meetings and hope to see you all here.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and wonderful job, ladies. I definitely learned a lot from both of you. So thank you for taking the time to do this presentation for us and our members. I will send a meeting, not a meeting recap, but a presentation recap with Victoria's information and the Toastmasters link. And I have this recorded also, so I'll make sure to share that on our social media platforms. But if you guys ever have any questions, please email me directly. My email is rosa@wenatchee.org, super easy. And you can look at our calendar online to see what for lunches we have planned for the year. So thank you everyone for joining us, and hopefully I see you next month.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.